we need to talk about the psychology behind what's keeping us stuck. Doing the meditation, I'm trying to set the boundaries. I exercise, I try to take care of myself. So why am I still burning out? What lies below all of this and what keeps us stuck is that people only see what's on the surface, what we want them to see. And the real path to mindfulness and peak performance is understanding all the stuff below the iceberg. I just want to invite you to accept.
Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for today. Now, to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Doug Brown. Doug Brown, JD, is the law firm leadership coach and chief learning officer at Summit Success, LLC. As an executive coach and law practice consultant, he shares practical strategies for sustainable legal practice and attorney well-being. After experiencing panic attacks during high stakes negotiations and receiving an ADHD diagnosis in his early 50s, Doug developed frameworks that work with your wiring, not against it. His experience includes private and in house legal practice, serving as a chief executive of the Connecticut Bar Association, and designing MBA leadership programs for experienced executives. Doug's approach is practical strategies from someone who's been there, not theory from someone who hasn't practiced law. The webinar presentation that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and Doug will be taking questions from the audience. So if you have questions, you can always submit them by clicking the Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen and sending those in at any time. Now, without further ado, here is Doug to discuss Beyond Mindfulness, the real psychology for peak performance without burnout.
Thank you so much for having me. This program's about Beyond Mindfulness, and it came up because I had so much great response to the mindfulness program that some of you may have seen, I think about a month ago on Justia and available for replay, that I thought, well, there's something more here. So today I want to go and get into the psychology and go deeper beyond just, yeah, you should be more mindful, and really kind of get into the real details of it. So just to level set, um, and if you didn't see that program, stay with us. Don't worry, because I'm going to give you what you need from that, and you can go back and get that because I designed it so if this is your first time here, you'll be fine. So mindfulness, just to start as a definition, is in its simplest form about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. And that's hard for us lawyers. I mean, in the other program, I talk about stress management techniques and work-life balance. And for a lot of people, those techniques make a difference. Why am I talking about psychology? A lot of my work is with managing partners on succession planning so they can build valuable and sustainable firms and eventually transition out. But what I keep seeing is the burnout, the overwhelm, the being trapped by the firm you built. And that's not just a wellness issue, it's a value issue. If you want to build a sustainable firm or a sustainable career, you can't do that if you're drowning in operations. You can't create options for yourself if you can't delegate. You can't maximize the firm value if you're the bottleneck. So we need to talk about the psychology behind what's keeping us stuck, because what I hear all the time, and I see it myself, I've lived it, as Nina said, look, I'm doing the meditation, I'm trying to set the boundaries, I exercise, I try to take care of myself. So why am I still burning out? I'm doing all the things you said, and it's helping a little, but I'm still burning out. That's why we're here. So we're going to address the real psychology behind why successful lawyers struggle with this despite knowing what to do. Not just so you know why your brain kind of gets in your way. And I want to encourage you, as Nina said, if you have questions as we go ahead and put them in the Q&A. If you've got a comment and want to put in the Q&A too, that's fine. We're going to have a chance to go into your own particular things here pretty quickly. So let's see, mental health matters. Now, we know that we've made real progress as a profession talking about mental health. And we know what the grind looks like, the back-to-back meetings, the client emergencies, the emails at all hours. Um, but here's what kind of bothers me a little bit. We've gone from ignoring mental health to offering kind of surface level solutions that don't really address the real problem. So I'm guessing if you're here that you have done some of this work. You've tried a meditation app, maybe used it for a little while, maybe not. You've attended wellness programs through Justia or the Bar Association. You've read the articles. You've said no more often. You've blocked out your own time for your own stuff on the calendar. Maybe even you've updated for the 45th time your productivity system or your time management app. And especially if you're in a leadership role where you've got everybody depending on you, partners, associates, staff, clients, you you can't let them see you struggle. You don't want them to see you struggle. So we mask, we power through, we pile more on our plate because after all, we can handle it. We've always been able to handle it until we can't. Here's what I did. And maybe you did this too. I used all of my lawyer skills to optimize, get more efficient, be better and faster. Because if I could just be better at managing it all, if I could just get more done, everything would be just fine, right? And the burnout came back anyway, came out more frequently. It was harder each time. So then I started feeling broken. Like, well, it's my fault. Something's wrong with me because I'm an accountability guy. Why can't I handle this? Everyone else seems fine. And God forbid I let somebody see me struggle because then obviously I'm not a good leader if people see me struggling. So here's what I've discovered. All these strategies, mindfulness, boundaries, productivity hacks, they're all treating symptoms. They're not addressing the core psychological issue. It's an addiction. We've been conditioned. We're addicted to the practice grind, not the work itself, but the identity it gives us, the validation, the proof that we matter based on what we produce. Our self-worth is conditioned to the grind. So when we try to step back, our brain panics because you don't know who you are without it. I'm like, I'm not particularly happy, said a client, but I'm not particularly unhappy. And if I step back and I'm less valuable, then who am I? You might be nodding your head like, yeah, and you're not alone. So that cycle accelerates. We burn out, feel broken, and it just keeps going on and on and on. Okay, so let's talk about some solutions. These are the questions that everybody asks. Underneath the question of why do I still burn out is the questions that I just turned 60. I've been working on with some intention for the last 5 years. Who am I if I'm not producing? If I'm not taking care of my family and everybody else? Where's my value if I'm not contributing at this level like I always have? I hear this all the time. I've got to be the one that bills the most hours or collects the most or the most. How do I prove that I matter if I try to slow down? And even if you're early or mid-career, slowing down might just be making time to be with your family. But there's this you, having guilt-free time off. That's a different story. And then why can't I enjoy things that feel good anymore? So I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but that's why you're here. We're trying to get into the psychology of it. Okay. Now, where did my mouse go? There it is. All right. So here's the real problem. Um, when your identity is fused with the grind, then our brain is going to fight us at every steps of the way. Like this dog, he's having his time of his life playing with the tug of war. He's completely locked in and he won't let go. You throw the rope, he chases it, brings it right back. He's more excited each time. The game escalates. And sometimes, I'm guilty of this, you get bit by accident. It's not because the dog is mean, it's because he's so into the game, he doesn't realize he's causing the damage. Or like me, you wake up the next morning wondering, why does my shoulder hurt from fighting with the dog? So if that's you with the practice grind and you're locked into the game, the validation, the identity, the proof that you matter, you can't let go, that's where all the mindfulness techniques in the world aren't going to help if you're still playing the same game. So we want to give you insights into the game that you're actually playing so that some of the strategies that I've shared and will share can work. So the psychology behind it. And the thing you'll learn while I'm talking about this for you, be alert for it. There are strategies, there are techniques that you can use with other people in your life too. So it's not just about you, but maybe there's a friend that could benefit from it too. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about a panic attack. I know Nina mentioned it in the introduction, and I didn't talk about this for years because I thought, well, God, obviously, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. So if somebody knows you have a mental health issue, you're obviously going to be not a very good lawyer. But here's what happened. Um, I was on the phone negotiating a major deal. I was a general manager of a $20 million business with 110 employees in it. And I was really trying to save this division and the jobs of those 100 people and their livelihoods and their families. And I was taking it very personally. And everybody was depending on me to get it right in everything. So at the same time, our group had done a pretty good job, and I'd been tapped by the global organization to be a global vice president, which sounds glamorous, until I realized I was doing two giant jobs without any support from myself. So everything was on my shoulders. So I'm sitting in the office during this critical negotiation, carrying all this weight without even really realizing it because I'm tough, right? I should be able to handle this. But all of a sudden, I I couldn't really hear the words that were coming out. I got short of breath. Um, and I don't have a great family history for heart attacks and other things. So I was convinced in that moment that I was having, it was bad. I was feeling like I had a heart attack. Nothing was in focus. Um, so my director of operations was there. He took over the call and said, we're going to have to call you back. They called upstairs. The company's health and safety manager happened to be a nurse. So she came down and said, "Oh, don't worry, you're not dying. It's just a panic attack. Just a panic attack." Oh my God, how embarrassing. So I didn't even know it was a thing. I thought it was a personal failing. Like I must have fouled up. And these panic attacks can show up in lots of different ways. They might not show up in the way that it showed up for me. It might show up in just getting a freeze in your office. It might show up as being overly emotional, but it's just where you just can't focus anymore and you feel like you're out of control, out of body a little bit. And that's really frightening. Um, that wasn't the hardest part. Not a panic attack, it's what came after. The guilt, the shame, the feeling like I failed everybody, and then the cycle started accelerating. I tried everything. And here's this thing, on the outside, I'm the only person going through that because to everybody else, everything was fine. I looked amazing, resilient. I just had an off day. But in the inside, it was wearing me down. And I thought this was all normal. And it took years from my coach and from my therapist before I'd start seeing the weight that I was carrying. I didn't understand why, though. And then I got introduced to this thing called the upper limit problem, and everything started to make sense. This framework comes from the psychologist Gay Hendricks, and she researched high achievers. Look, if you're here, you're a high achiever. So um, he discovered that we all have this unconscious limit on how much success, happiness, or even love we allow ourselves to experience. That's the upper limit problem. So your brain has a thermostat for success, happiness, and even stress, and it's set based on your early experiences, what felt normal and safe. So it was set. in an interesting way when we were young lawyers. So when things start going too well, when you exceed your normal thermostat setting, your brain kind of freaks out because it's beyond normal is dangerous. So this is what gets in the way when you start trying to implement these mindfulness strategies for yourself and they start to work, your brain starts to freak out a little bit. So it manufactures problems, creates trauma, it can create self sabotage, or even give you a panic attack. So, um, so you might have experienced this like this. You might have cleared a backlog and there's this new crisis to worry about. You close a major case and you feel let down and you wind up getting into conflict with somebody that you shouldn't, or you get praised by a client, but you can't accept the praise because you're obsessing about a mistake. That sound familiar? That's your brain bringing you back to normal stress. Problem we as lawyers is our brains are wired for this constant crisis mode, adrenaline addiction. So when we try to step away from it, as I have tried to do, we find ourselves getting pulled back to the chaos. That's why when you have to work on something important that's a longer term thing, you wind up working on all the stuff that's on fire, that's a crisis, because that actually makes you comfortable. I know our brains are really scary places sometimes. And this is not a failure of will, it's all chemical. Um, when you exceed your upper limit, your amygdala, your threat detection part of your brain activates and it floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline. And you might hear about this as freeze, fight, or flee. So your rational brain knows you're I'm fine, but your nervous system is screaming danger. So here's what it might look like in your actual life. If you're a partner, you've got an associate who makes the same mistake again, and you snap. You snap at them way harder than the situation deserves. That's your fight reflex. Or how about this? A difficult client's name pops up on your phone or in your email, and your adrenaline spikes before you even hear their voice. Here we go again. That's your threat response. Or, you get a call from your college student late at night, and you're obviously assuming all the worst case scenarios. You're on high alert. And here's the big thing. When you are constantly stressed out, the logical part of your brain disconnects. So it's very hard to reason your way out of it unless you've established some go-to habits because your brain has to get to that sense of safety. So you can't out meditate your biology. You have to understand what's happening first and then try to work with it. Um, okay. So I'm just going to ask you to take a moment and we're just for yourself, not for anybody else. Grab your, excuse me, piece of paper. What do you think your setting is for how successful you're allowed to be? Or how much happiness you're allowed to feel? Or how much peace you're allowed to have? Is there a time when you have gotten to a certain level of success and you kind of can't break through? Um, what might that be? And there's real value. I didn't really know this when I was first learning about this. There's real value to naming these things because once we name it, we get our awareness to it, and our logical lawyer brains can help work with it. So, how can you find the switch and the off switch, or at least a pause, is a question coming in. Um, yeah, that's a tough one. Part of it is, um, if you feel yourself starting to spiral down in that direction, um, one of the first steps is just to name it and just to breathe. So I went years without understanding that I'm not going to turn this to an ADHD presentation for high functioning ADHD, but I will tell you that there are certain habits that come up with that, that are, some are good and some are challenging. But let's say you're kind of a people pleaser. I'm guilty, right? And when you feel yourself going down that direction, our default is to try to over please or um, to just ignore it. And sometimes I've found just by saying, wait a minute, this is my brain wiring going on. Am I people pleasing here? Is that really necessary? Just giving yourself a breath, a beat to stop, look, and listen, just like when we were talked across the street. Um, that can give your brain a bit of pause. And it's really important when you're in this crisis situation and you feel like you need to solve it right away to have a routine you can go to where you're really literally taking a deep breath, like inhale to the count of 4, hold it 5 or 6 seconds, then let it out to like a count of 8. Do that a couple times. That literally helps your brain reset. It gives you a bit of a sense of safety. That's at least a pause. So I want you to be alert to what your triggers and your upper limits are so we can name it. And then when we name it, we give ourselves that pause. Um, and the thing is that we're talking about years of conditioning. So we're not going to magically turn this off just with a piece of information. This is good. This is a habit. This is something that, I teach and then work with people on a lot because we're trying to learn new habits. Like I was talking to a new client the other day and I had asked him for something he hadn't, his assistant hadn't gotten it, his finance person hadn't gotten it to me. And he says, "Oh, I'm just going to go do it myself." I said, "Oh, hold on, time out. You couldn't do that. It's not an emergency." And what happens is that something you do often. You just complete it for the person because you're frustrated or whatever. Said, "Yeah, I have to do it all the time." And I said, "Well, what are you training them to do if you always finish their work for them?" You're kind of training them that they can't be trusted and they don't have to do the work because you'll finish it. So one of the things that I have created is a little 2-minute upper limit assessment that helps you calculate where your thermostat is set. And it shows you some specific ways your brain tries to bring you back down when you exceed it. So I'm going to give you access to that here in a few minutes. Um, and that's going to help you recognize those patterns. So think about the last time that you were really crushing it and everything was going great. And we can leave that question up in the Q&A because I want to come back to that and don't forget it. Um, what happened after that? After it was over, did you have something that was kind of the opposite? I like to golf. You can't see in the background. I've got a picture of the Masters here. Anybody who golfs, you recognize, you hit a birdie, what's going to happen on the next hole? You're probably going to get a bogey or a double. Why? I don't know. It's just the universe. Things happen. Maybe that's my upper limit problem. So what lies below all of this and what keeps us stuck is that people only see what's on the surface, what we want them to see. And the real path to mindfulness and peak performance is understanding all the stuff below the iceberg that is going on subconsciously for us, habits for us, conditioning that we don't even know it's happening. Now I'm showing my age. This is a picture of the album cover for Billy Joel's album, The Stranger. Remember it? It was from the 1970s. I think I wore out the grooves. This was actually a record. Yep, before cassettes or CDs, and I'm sure now it's on Spotify. But do you remember how this song starts? I'm not going to sing. Don't worry. I don't want to cause that kind of crisis for you. We all have a face that we hide away forever, and we take them out and show ourselves when everyone has gone. That's the public persona and the private reality. And that's what high performing lawyers do every day. And what I didn't understand for years is it wasn't just about hiding my struggles, it's masking. It's creating this public persona so that they don't know who the real you is. So you're performing all the time. And our legal culture makes it worse. We're supposed to be composed, confident, resilient, never let them see you sweat. But there's a huge unconscious cost of doing that. When I first started exploring, figuring this out for myself, I didn't even realize I was masking. I'm just thinking that's how you succeed. That's how you get along. That's what high performers do. When I started learning about public speaking, I was coming in with the perception that you need to be polished and have it, everything down and timing perfect all the time. And then I realized that's not what people want to see. I did not realize how much energy took me to put on my mask every day and be what everybody else needed me to be. To smile through that partner meeting when your chest is tight, or reassure that client when your own anxiety is spiking. Or how about telling your associate to set boundaries when you're answering emails to 11 o'clock at night? So that assessment I talked about and we've been doing so far is designed to build awareness. So at least you know that it's happening. And once you spot the patterns, you can understand the cost, and that's when real change can start. Um, this is when I'm working with clients, they expect that we'll work on all the tactical things, and we do. Um, but what I find is I check in with them, they really like the fact that I listen. I can help them create space and ask questions so they can see the situation and the path forward much more clearly without feeling like they're broken. So here are some of the patterns that I see all the time, and some of these might be familiar to you. I've talked about some overwork and busyness, perfectionism. I'm going to protect myself by being perfect. I have an associate that I've been working with, and her version of perfect is to over research everything so that there's no chance that somebody else can come up with something that she didn't find. But she was getting all tangled up trying to find proof that there wasn't a precedent for something. It's like a never ending saga. People pleasing. If everybody likes me, I'm going to be safe. We would be shocked at how many lawyers who are fantastic litigators and very aggressive in court fall into like the almost opposite people pleasing in the office. Imposter syndrome, boy, that was a big thing for me. I remember the first time I went to my office as a new associate, took a deep breath, still remember exactly where I was. I took a deep breath and said, I sure hope they don't find out I don't know what I'm doing. Um, if somebody's being over controlling or micromanaging, that's an issue. Self-soothing with food, wine, substances, Netflix, work. I didn't realize that overworking was a coping mechanism for me, so I didn't have to deal with all the noise in my head. These mental health challenges that it took me until my 50s to realize they were going on, because when you read the articles, I didn't I didn't fit any of those patterns. But the mental health challenges are real. Not an excuse. They're just a different kind of wiring. The ADHD wiring is like being a Mac in a Windows world. So it was difficult for me um, to finally open up to the idea that it could be possible. You see, my brain's trying to talk to you about one thing, but then I see this thing over here. This is real life, people. This is live. So once I opened up to the idea that this was not my own failing and I got this diagnosis at 54 years old, um, everything started to make sense. The constant need to do more, the rescue pattern, taking care of other people. It wasn't a character flaw. And the statistics show that 30 to 40% of legal professionals have some undiagnosed condition that affects how you process stress. You might be one of them. You might be beating yourself up. Don't stop it. Um, okay. Th- I know it's easy for me to say. It was very hard for me to do. Um, we're in a world where the input levels we have, the responsibilities we have, our feeling of a need to provide for people, our need for control would overwhelm even the most competent person. Being curious about whether this is something more than just willpower, if there are additional strategies or support that would be helpful, that's not a failing. I attended a mental health program for the Maine State Bar Association probably 10 years now, 10 years ago now. And I was one of the speakers. And the person who spoke before me said, lawyers have to admit that they have failed and ask for help. I almost jumped out of my chair. Since when is asking for help failure? I don't know about you, but I think asking for help is strength. So you're not going to fix everything all at once. We want to identify a primary pattern, address that, work on it, and build some positive momentum. So that pattern decoder is going to help you determine your primary pattern. Okay, we've spent. Let's see. There's a question here. How do you know it's time to hang it up, or change your work? Be less driven, less anxious, and over checking like that associate trying to find citations. Wow, that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. Um, it does require taking a step back. It's hard for us to process things logically when we're under stress. Um, One of the things that I have worked with lawyers on, and I've got resources on this too, is really kind of taking a step back and looking at what are your values for real? And there's an exercise for that. How are you spending your time? Where is your attention going? And then how is your current life, work, you know, wheel of life? How does that line up or not with what your values are? And that allows us to get specific about, well, what about your work is de-energizing you, an energy vampire, and what parts of it are bringing you something? Because there's always some mix, right? Is it the work? Is it the environment? Is it the way you're adapting to the environment? The slippery slope argument we learned as lawyers early on does not serve us in this regard. You asked about being less driven, less anxious, and overchecking like that associate. And the slippery slope argument goes that if you start down this path, you will slide all the way to the bottom. And that is dangerous for our mental health. Because under that theory, if you stop, if you are, quote, less driven, you will, under the slippery slope theory, lose all of your drive and, live in a van down by the river. That's not how it works, folks. So when we look at less driven, what are you being driven to now? How does that match up or not with your values? And do we need to redirect some of that energy? And what are the causes of the anxiety? Is it things that how you're processing your world, or is it um, situations you can change? And for the associate specifically, what my conversations with her were, okay, what do you expect is going to happen with the outcome of this motion hearing? Oh, well, we're probably going to lose. "Well, okay. So what's the concern? What are you researching for?" "Well, I just don't want to get embarrassed that somebody finds something I couldn't find." I said, "Okay, cool. So how much research have you done?" And she explained it. And I said, "That sounds like a lot of research. Did the partner you just talked to, were they concerned about it?" "Well, they said just to check this one thing." I said, "Okay. So do you think if you check that in like 30 minutes, you could get confident enough that you didn't miss something obvious? Yeah. I said, and even if you happen to miss something, is that going to change the outcome? No, we're probably going to lose anyway. Okay, spend 30 minutes. Spend a good 30 minutes. See, what we did was we identified the context, we gave some parameters, and we agreed that there was a certain amount of time that should go into it because we weren't in the middle of it right at the moment. I hope that answers the question. Um, okay, I'm just looking at my clock. I want to make sure we have time for questions. So if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We're going to talk about a few of yeah. Looking at my notes, mindful of time because I could talk about this stuff for hours. So, um, some of the strategies to work with your brain. Um, one, I just want to invite you to accept the following: self care is not selfish. I'll say it again. Self care is not selfish. I discovered this one day when I was walking on a beach in Fort Lauderdale, and I'll save the story for another day. But I asked myself the question, I said, how come I'm an either or, black or white? I can either take care of someone else or take care of myself. Why isn't it both? And in the conversation in my head, it went something like, hmm, what if it didn't have to be either or? What if taking care of myself actually improved my ability and capacity to help other people? What if it allowed me to show up in a more productive way? What if it made me a better husband, father, friend, partner? Hmm, what about that? And so I began to test it and explore it. So think about that for yourself. Other quick strategy. When I was in a corporate environment, I was the youngest guy and I wanted to get along with the general counsel and the controller and the CFO. And it seemed like all they had to talk about was something negative about people. It was like you couldn't say something positive because you'd be perceived as stupid. And I didn't realize how toxic that was. I forget how I realized it, but I said, I'm just not going to participate in that. It wasn't that I could cut myself off from them, but I just wasn't going to be an active participant in oh, the glass is half empty conversations. Time to remove myself from that situation. So watch for people and situations who are the energy vampires, energy busters, and try to put yourself in situations where they're energy boosters. And it's hard because it's kind of cool to be negative. What's one opportunity you could have, even if it's not walking away, but just not extending the conversation where people are naturally sitting around and complaining? Because how we talk to ourselves affects our mental state. Okay. I want to talk about the book Brain Rules by John Medina. And that was kind of one of the beginning parts of my journey when I was teaching in the MBA program. And I'm a Y kid, if you haven't figured that out yet. Um, so Medina's a neuroscientist. And this book, which is kind of old now, but he talks about the chemical neuroscience of the brain and how it works. And things like we think we can multitask, but the way the chemicals in our brain work, we're not actually multitasking, we're switching really quickly. So I got curious about how I can work with my brain and not against it. And that especially helped when I got to the point of accepting the ADHD diagnosis because I'm like, oh, that explains a lot. Maybe I need a different strategy because it's an interest-based nervous system. So how is it that I can work with the way my brain processes instead of just trying to process like everybody else? It's the Mac in the Windows world. Question. I'm reading it, but you don't know what I'm reading. So let me read it. As an older attorney, I guess that's me now. Thanks. Have you wrestled with the question of when to completely separate from the practice of law and how to transition to less than full time law practice and what you might look like? And if so, what factors did you rely on to direct your decisions? Great question. Um, Short answer is yes. I did that for myself. Um, and I do that with clients. And for every person I talk to, their transition is different. I talked to somebody the other day who says they have a hard deadline. I'm going to be done doing this work by 12:31. Okay. What are you going to be doing? And so we're using some of the principles I taught as an MBA professor of, well, what's your vision for yourself? What does that look like? And she had a pretty clear vision. She had just gotten remarried. She's going to travel and she has a pretty good idea what she wants to do. Another client I worked with, he didn't know what he wanted to do, but he knew what he didn't want to do. He's like, I got too much energy to play golf and pickleball all day. I need to do something. And we went about a process of trying to figure out what does that more of a phased retirement look like to him. And what's fascinating is most lawyers and most entrepreneurs just worked by instinct and hard work to get where they are. And now for the very first time, they have options and they have to think about what is it that I really want to do if I have the flexibility. Some lawyers want to transition and what makes them feel good is I want to be the wise owl that I can handle some certain things, not be in the management all the time and be a good mentor. Great. Then let's configure that. So the factors to direct the decisions, it goes a little bit to what I was talking about a few minutes ago. What are your values? Um, and how do we meet those values? Because it's different for every person. So there's the values, there's understanding what you want to be doing, there's your legacy, and helping, as I've been going through, seeing that my value, is when I realized this about myself as I was helping a client, my value isn't from the quantity of work that I do, it's from the quality of it. Because I was having this conversation with a client and he said, I may not be the smartest guy, but I've always worked harder than everybody else. I can outwork anybody else. And he's 62. And I said, if you ask your clients what they value about you or your family, would that be that you can get more done? I don't know. I said, well, everything you've told me in the years we've been working together is it's about the questions you ask about the value, your wisdom and experience. That's not about billing hours. That's a really hard shift to make for yourself. I hope that addresses the question. And I'm happy to have follow on conversation with anybody about these things. And I'll share my contact information. Send me an email. We can set up a conversation because that's an outstanding question. Okay. With the 15 minutes we have remaining, I think I shared my self care isn't selfish story. One of the things I shared that same story in a little bit larger measure at a New York State Bar Association annual meeting about the idea of self care not being selfish and how I use that to allow myself to invest at a time in my life when I couldn't have afforded it, but I couldn't have afforded not to. And um, I watched the managing partners of these really successful firms, their eyes light up like, wait, I never thought of that. And I sat back down when I was done speaking, and the partner of this, great big firm whose name you would recognize leans over and says, that had never occurred to me before that I could take care of myself while not shortchanging other people. When we invest in ourselves as leaders, as humans, as parents, that's helping us show up more productively. It's just like the situation, folks, when it's getting to be 7 o'clock at night and you're not home like you promised, and you're burning the candle at both ends and you don't have much energy left, but you decide to push through anyway. What if you took that time to go home and be with the family and recharge and spent that hour the next morning or later when your brain had a chance to reset? I mean, we lawyers treat ourselves a little bit like marathon runners, but not in a good way. My brother once ran the Boston Marathon, so I got to see what that was like. Now, I'm not a runner. Look at me. So, but I'm like, we lawyers are just like a marathon runner. We'll run a marathon, we'll stumble over the finish line, and like there's somebody there saying, "Okay, that's great, congratulations. Now run back." And we do that over and over again. We don't give ourselves time to rest. It doesn't make us any good to ourselves or anybody else. So that little voice in your shoulder that says, "You can't do that. It's being selfish." That's a lie. Um, I've taught time management for 30 years. We can't manage time. All we can do is manage our energy. We don't have a time problem. We have an energy and attention problem. I was taught that peak performance is getting more done in less time, being more efficient, and just cranking work out. But that isn't peak performance. That's a trap that creates burnout. So I was talking with a friend of mine, a psychiatrist, who wrote a book called Brain Blocks. And I was lamenting that I was so frustrated. I could only get 6 or 7 hours of deep work in during the day. And he looked at me as a psychiatrist will do. And he says, "Doug, why do you think you should be able to get 6 or 7 hours of like deep, heavy thinking work in a day?" And I said, "Well, because I have to." And that's when he introduced me to this idea of cognitive load, which blew my mind a little bit. So he demonstrated the research shows that we are biologically and chemically, there are only so many hours of pure, deep cognitive work that we can do at one time. And for the average person, it might be 4 hours, maybe. Now, you might be thinking like I did, oh my gosh, 4 hours, that's not nearly enough time. That can't possibly be true. But the idea of cognitive load is that not all tasks require the same load. So, being in front of a judge, managing difficult clients, crafting arguments, dealing with an interpersonal issue with an office, those are high cognitive load tasks. They require your full focus and attention, just like what I'm doing here with you today. Other stuff, email, administrative, routine tasks, billing, things you can do while you're walking chew gum at the same time, those aren't higher cognitive load. So one of the reasons people burn out is we treat the same everything with the same priority, and we don't sequence the high load and low load tasks into that part of our day. And that's why we struggle to delegate. So when you push past that limit, tasks that you could complete in 20 minutes take an hour, takes 45 minutes, 3 or 4 times longer. And there's a cliff. Efficiency doesn't just get slower, it crashes. And then, because we're perfectionists, we say, what the heck's wrong with me? Why is this taking so long? And that's a real problem for us high performers because we have massively unrealistic expectations for ourselves. We think we should be able to be on for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. After all, we got to do billable hours, right? That's not how our brains work. So we have to manage our energy. So I want to ask yourself, just take a minute right now, write your pen and paper. When do you do your best work? What time of day? For me, it's like the first 3 or 4 hours of the morning and a little bit after 7 at night. Protect those windows and put your highest cognitive tasks in those windows. And when your energy starts to slide, give yourself the chance to recharge. Because energy management isn't just about squeezing more things out of your day. It's about working with your brain's natural rhythms, not against them. And be mindful of how the ways that we self medicate and turn off at the end of the day have a massive impact on our sleep and on our cognitive performance the next day. And yes, so question. I am fine, and this is another great question. Thank you so much for all the questions, folks. Keep them coming. I love this. Um, Question. I am finding I'm spending too much time thinking about a client matter and I'm unable to switch to off duty. Love that. Reminds me of a series of conversations I had with my client, David. And his thing was he lived too close to the office. It was like a 5-minute drive. So he'd still have his head in lawyer mode in the office and he would drive home, get out of his truck, walk in, and he had teenagers and there was massive chaos in his house. So what's the first thing he did? He's a problem solver, right? So he tries to solve the problem. He wasn't in a state of mind to solve the problem. There wasn't a problem to be solved. It's normal family chaos. So my suggestion to him was, and this works in so many ways. So if you're trying to switch to off duty like he was, I said, before you get out of your truck, take a deep breath and ask yourself the question, what kind of experience do I want my family to have with me right now? Or if you're not going to be with your family, what kind of experience do I want to have right now? It's to be intentional, be mindful and intentional. He said, will that work? I said, try it. Fast forward about 2 months, 6 weeks, 2 months. And in our coaching sessions, we always start with what's going on? What are your thoughts coming in? And he said, I told my wife we were meeting today, and unprompted, she said, you're a better person to be around since you started working with him. Like, it's not what we were working on, folks. But that being more intentional about the experience he wanted to provide allowed him to come home and not make the situation worse and provide an experience on purpose. So when you're stuck in that client thinking, if there's stuff you need to remember, write it down so you don't forget. And then think, in this next segment of my day, in this next interaction, whether with yourself or others, what experience do I want to have? What experience do I want to provide? That's a very short answer, but that intentionality, that mindfulness will help you make that switch. We have to be in action um, to change things. And I'm running a little bit short on time, so I just wanted to hit the main point here. And here's how adults actually learn. You get an idea, you play with it, you try it, you see what works, you iterate. And when you do it by yourself without a thinking partner, it's easy to give that stuff up. Knowledge itself is necessary but not sufficient to make change. We have to be in action, and we have to have some resource to help us process that. Because knowing what to do and learning to do it are different things. Heck, if it was just that easy, I'd take one lesson and I'd be on the pro golf tour. So that's why people come to my time management programs over and over again. So being in action, making mistakes, picking yourself up and keeping going, and not getting down on yourself. I have found that high performing lawyers, and maybe this is an ADHD thing, we are so much harder on ourselves than we would be with anyone else. Something my therapist alerted me to again. And she said, I was giving myself a hard time because I'm like, I'm just really ticked at myself. I know I need to do these things. I just can't get them done. And it's frustrating as hell. And she said, why are you being so mean to yourself? Like, I'm not being mean to myself. And she's like, no, stop. You're being mean to yourself. I had no idea. So pick one thing and take one thing to work on at a time. So I've created a few tools for you that help you take this deeper And there is with your materials, there's I should have mentioned this earlier. In your materials online, there's a written guide that goes through a lot of this stuff. I'm not trying to repeat that guide, obviously, but there's a Beyond Burnout roadmap that shows you some paths forward. There's that upper limit assessment and the pattern decoder that I talked about. So they're all free. And you can just scan that QR code or go to that link on the screen. Go pick those up. And I think they'll really help you. And you can also reach out to me. My email is there on the screen. But you want to take one thing you have heard today and try to put it into action. And the thing that I've discovered is it's very hard to see patterns when you're in them. So the upper limit will help you see that. And the one size fits all advice doesn't work for neurodivergent brains. So that's why I do the work I do. I see some more questions coming in, and in the time remaining, I want to answer some of the questions. And I see them coming in. Love this. So what I am going to do, Nina's going to help me. If I don't get time to answer all these questions, I will answer them. And if you go to the link there, I'll make sure I include an email that answers these questions in some more details. I'm reading the questions. I'm trying to decide which one to go first. So I'll pick, why, easy for me to say, why does relying on willpower alone often fail when managing stress and workload? Great question. It's not a willpower issue. It's a habit. It's a brain chemical issue. So it relates to one of the other questions: is what happens in the brain during high stress situations with an amygdala hijack. So here's what happens when you have stress and workload. This is I'm not talking about short-term episodic stress, although that's can happen. The level of long-term chronic stress we are dealing with has our amygdala, our freeze, fight, or flee reflex, on a hair trigger. So it doesn't take a lot extra to send us over the edge, to cause that stress or workload to disconnect the higher logic. And there's a biological reason for this. And the biological reason is our amygdala is designed to keep us alive. So it can't figure out if that stress is a saber-toothed tiger trying to hunt you down or some existential thing that you've made up in your head. So what it does is it says we either need to fight, to run, or to freeze. And it disconnects. The hijack is disconnecting the higher logic in your brain. So when you try to think your way out of a really high stress situation, that's why it doesn't work. That's why when you're dealing with someone who is very emotional and stressed out, and you try to be the lawyer and be logical, that it doesn't land because it literally doesn't compute. So until we create that sense of safety for ourselves or others that allows our prefrontal cortex to re-engage, all the logic in the world isn't going to save you. So that's why willpower doesn't work. And that's what happens in the brain during those high stress situations. So at willpower itself, I used to think that was enough. And the danger with that is when it doesn't work, we get down on ourselves because we didn't try hard enough. This isn't about trying harder, folks. This is about finding strategies that work. So what did Einstein say? The insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That's what Chinese willpower is. Let's see. What psychological patterns commonly sabotage peak performance in the legal profession? All the things that we talked about, including which one? I mean, it's perfectionism, it's people pleasing, it's not letting people to see you to sweat. And it's the fact that, we are taught to be legal technicians. We're not taught to deal with the most important thing that we needed to learn, which is the thing we're told not to use as lawyers. It's emotion. It's our emotional intelligence. It's our self-awareness, our awareness of others and how we respond. I actually have a whole resource on that. But the lack of emotional intelligence is the number one factor in my mind that leads to burnout. The good news is it can be trained. Um, let's see. The upper limit problem I talked about a little bit earlier in the program, and where it limits professional success, is you get to a certain level and you self sabotage. And if you see yourself getting to those patterns, and why does that happen? One of the things I'm a builder. I like to solve problems. And my whole career is about solving problems. When the problems get mostly solved, I get bored. Advice or resources in the time that we have, for one who's already gone past burnout to get back on track. Thank you. As one who's gone well past burnout, um, that's an essential question. So, a couple of resources and advice. When almost every state has some version of Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. It's usually sponsored by the state or the bar association. It's completely free, completely confidential. And that is often a good first place to start saying, help, I'm burned out. And to get some psychological support, I'm not a psychologist, I've just lived this stuff, but there's professional help available. And it's not a weakness to get the help. It could also be from your general practitioner. It all started for me when I just started talking about stress. Um, and I got curious. The question was, how about you've gone beyond burnout? Recognize that it's burnout. This is this cycle. So burnout is defined by the World Health Organization as long-term chronic stress without strategies to improve. So we have to get curious about what are the things we can do to make it just a little bit better, and just a little bit better after that. So having an experienced person to talk to, that honestly, it isn't a friend, it isn't your spouse, it isn't your partner at work, it's somebody who is going to be able to, you can talk to them in confidence. That stuff works, folks. And if you have some neurological, let's not forget that um, there are medications that can help too. Um, and then I guess the last question to wrap up is, why do many high performing lawyers continue to experience burnout despite wellness efforts like mindfulness and time management? Boy, I wish I had the answer that could magically solve that. Part of the problem is we're high performing, and we believe we should be able to work ourselves through, or that asking for help is a problem, and or that we are high performing, or hey, my problems aren't as bad as so and so's problems, and I don't even want to take resources by getting help for myself. We tell ourselves these lies and these stories, and that somehow asking for help makes you less successful. I've shared a lot about myself, how my brain works, how sometimes it doesn't. Took me a while to do that. And I'm going to believe and have faith that you're still here watching. There's still something you can learn. So if I can put this out there for you, maybe you can put that out there for other people. But also, cautionary tale, not just with anybody, because there are those who will judge. So find yourself an environment where you can get support, because you deserve to have everything that you wanted to have when you became a lawyer. You deserve not to be burnout. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to um, get to a point in your life where you can enjoy the finer things. And why not today? There's no trophy at the end of this, folks, for doing this yourself. I've never once attended a funeral and somebody said, Doug was this fantastic person and he did everything himself. There's no trophy at the end. This is a team sport. So that's my hope for you. Who do you have on your team? Remember, this is not a character flaw, it's chemistry. That It's natural for high performers to struggle. It's just what happens. That's what made you a high performer. And by the way, you won't lose your high performer status if you find some help with this. And be patient with yourself. We're talking about learning new things, and learn as you go. Um, I think that's the end of my beautiful 5 minutes. I do write about Beyond the Practice Grind every week on my Substack, at that link there. Invite you to join me there or on LinkedIn, and appreciate the opportunity to be here, Nina, with you and with my friends at Justia. And I think I answered all of the questions. If you have other questions, you can also email me at the email address on the screen. Thank you for your attention. Be curious, stay in the work. There is life beyond burnout, I promise you. Nina, back to you.
Thank you so much, Doug, for sharing that and for thoughtfully answering our audience's questions. And thank you to all of our audience members for sending in your questions. We always really appreciate it. We want to thank you all so much for joining us for another Justia webinar. As I mentioned earlier today, if you're a lawyer attending, don't miss out on the Justia Lawyer Directory, a free tool to boost your professional presence. You can claim your profile at lawyers.justia.com to connect with millions of potential clients each month. And we've also added an FAQ feature to allow you to answer common questions and expand your reach in search and AI results. And if you want even more visibility, we have our Justia premium placements, gold and platinum, to help you appear above the organic listings. And you can learn about those at marketing.justia.com. Thank you all so much for joining. And thank you again to Doug for your time and expertise. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.